Games moved, which means we have an opportunity to talk about the playoff race, some of the Sabres competition to make the playoffs. Coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast with Joe DiBiase.
You're Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Joe DiBiase from the inner sanctum. It is freezing out. It is a blizzard out. I just came in from shoveling, and hopefully you're staying safe. Hopefully you have power, and hopefully you're able to get through a week without the Buffalo Sabres. They had a game scheduled for Friday night against the Tampa Bay Lightning at KeyBank Center. And that game, if you missed it earlier in the week, of course, you probably would know by now that that game was moved. That game was postponed due to inclement weather. It's a whiteout. I mean, nobody was ever driving to the arena. The idea that Tampa was coming here with that forecast is insane. So the NHL did the right thing here. They got way out in front of it. Tampa wasn't far away. They were in Toronto. So they were already out here, but just go home, come back in March. We'll see on March 4th. March 4th at 12:30. It'll be a matinee game that Tampa comes back for when they play the Sabres in Buffalo March 4th. And we'll see what the state the playoff race might be in at that point. But stay indoors. Stay indoors. Don't go out. Don't drive, don't do anything for the next couple of days. So binge some podcasts, binge some TV shows, some movies. Just stay hunkered down for the next 48 to 72 hours, depending on where you are at. We are going to take this opportunity as we are weeks or over a week between games to talk about the playoff race a little bit more and specifically look at the two teams that I believe are the biggest competition to the Buffalo Sabres and the wild card race. The Washington Capitals and the Florida Panthers. I believe those are the two teams that stand in the Sabres' way the most out of anybody that is going to be involved in what appears to be a 5-team, maybe 6-team playoff race for the final 2 wild card spots in the Eastern Conference. So that's coming up in a little bit. Take a deep dive into Washington, what's going on with their season, their prospects for making the playoffs as they'll be competing with the Sabres, and Florida, a surprising season for Florida, a Stanley Cup contender from the last 2 seasons that have had disappointing results so far this year, how they compare to the Sabres, their prospects to make the playoffs as well. But we do have over a week between games. The Sabres played Monday night in Vegas, and because they were out west, they were going to have a couple of day break in the middle and then play Tampa on Friday night. That game gets postponed, which means they are not playing until Tuesday night against the Columbus Blue Jackets back in Columbus, the site of Tage Thompson's 5-goal game and the Sabres' 9-goal game. So that should be fun. Bad team, back on the road. It's went really well last time you played them. That'll be Tuesday night's game the next time the Sabres are in action. So 8 days of rest. I think that's probably a good thing. I saw some fans, asking on YouTube, our YouTube channel about, in fact, the only question I think I really got on our YouTube channel in the last couple of days is the 8 days good or bad? Is it, okay, the Sabres had a lot of momentum. They've won 4 games in a row. They've won 7 of their last 10. Do we want to keep the momentum going and keep playing? Or is it good because of the rest that they're getting? I think it's more of that. I think it's more about the rest, the Sabres being fresh. We'll see if they can get anybody back from injury by that point. Ilya Lyubushkin maybe getting a little healthier. He might have rushed things back to get back in the lineup because the Sabres were so desperate for defensemen. Give Eric Comrie another week to get closer to being back. I think it's probably a good thing for the Sabres to get healthier, get fresher, bumps and bruises. It's their bye week in the early part of the season here in December. So I think it's more a good thing than a bad thing. I think they'll be fine coming out of the gates. And again, it's Columbus. It's a pretty soft opponent. Don't want to take anybody lightly. It's the NHL. Anything could happen, but soft opponent in the Blue Jackets. And I would be as confident as ever the Sabres are going to win that game, whether or not they played on Friday or not against Tampa. And then, by the way, if you're not familiar with the Sabres schedule for next week, it'll be Columbus Tuesday night, and then back home finally Thursday, December 29th, hosting the Detroit Red Wings. That will be the Sabres' first home game since the 6-0 game against the Kings on December 13th. So they will go over 2 weeks without playing at home. And then Saturday night at the Boston Bruins, the first meeting of the season between the Sabres and the Kings of the Atlantic Division, which right now are the Boston Bruins. So that's what's coming your way for the Sabres in the next little bit. We'll take a quick timeout here. When we come back, deep dives into the two teams I think are the Sabres' biggest competition to make the playoffs this season. That is the Washington Capitals and the Florida Panthers. That's on the way next here on the Locked On Sabres podcast with Joe DiBiase. We're brought to you by BetOnline.net. It's your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis all season long. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season, the NBA. They got it all for you at betonline.net. They are always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting information. Head to their website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Joe DiBiase back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. I want to talk about the two teams I believe are the biggest threat to the Sabres in the playoff race, Washington and Florida. We will start with the Washington Capitals. I will tell you this, though, looking at the standings, an updated look with, the Sabres being off for a couple of days and other teams around them playing, the Sabres will probably have games in hand on teams for a while here, a couple of months, at least a month, until that Philly game that was originally scheduled for March 4th, where they moved the Tampa game to, is played. That's a game they'll make up a little bit. I think we're going to be saying a lot here. Hey, the Sabres are so-and-so points back, but they've got this amount of games in hand. I think we're going to be using the phrase games in hand a lot coming up here if I have the scheduling right in my head. And as of now, look at where the Sabres sit compared to the teams around them in the playoff race. Florida has played 34 games, but the Sabres played 32. So Sabres played 32 games. Florida's played 34. Detroit's played 32. The Islanders have played 34. The Capitals have played 35. The Rangers have played 35. They've got 2 or 3 games in hand on everybody except the Detroit Red Wings. So as it stands today, the Sabres are tied in the standings with Florida at 34 points, but they have 2 games in hand. They have 1 point back of Detroit. They have played the same amount of games as the Red Wings. They are 4 points back of the Islanders, who are now out of a playoff spot, and the Sabres have 2 games in hand on the Islanders, so they can make that up by winning those 2 games in hand. And then the team sitting in a playoff spot right now, the final wild card spot in the East, is the Washington Capitals. They have 40 points in 35 games. That is 6 points ahead of the Sabres, but the Sabres have 3 games in hand. Again, theoretically speaking, if the Sabres could win all 3 of those games in hand, they would be tied in the standings with the Capitals. So, what are the Capitals? For me, they are the second biggest threat to a playoff spot in the East for the Sabres. I actually think the Sabres outrank the Red Wings, and I think they outrank the New York Islanders. I don't believe they outrank the Washington Capitals at this point in time, especially with Washington having a 6-point advantage, even if they only have, or even if the Sabres have the 3 games in hand. And as it stands today, at our partners at BetOnline, the Sabres are plus 425 to make the playoffs. So about 4-1 to make the postseason. The Washington Capitals, meanwhile, are minus 105. About a 50-50 coin flip to make the postseason are the Capitals. And let's look at Washington, where they sit, what their prospects are. The Capitals, as of late, have been playing very well. They have won 3 games in a row after a very up and down start to the season. They have won 8 of their last 10, 3 in a row. Their season, though, is all about Ovechkin. And going forward, it will all be about Alexander Ovechkin and his chase for the goal record, his chase for Wayne Gretzky's goal record. He is now within 100 goals. He is going to get there. It's really, for me, now more a matter of when, not if, Ovechkin breaks that all-time record. And the Capitals' existence now is about that goal record. They have even said it. They have said it. They are not going to rebuild as long as Ovi is chasing down that record. That's what they care the most about. And I think that's fair. They've got their cup. And sure, another one would be nice, but Ovechkin breaking the goal record is something nobody else will ever do. People will win cups. Teams will win cups. Maybe not, hopefully Buffalo one day. But that goal record is something crazy special. And I respect what the Capitals are doing, making everything about that. Now, a little bit about their roster. It's not your prototypical Capitals team, your fun, young, speedy, offensive Washington Capitals from back in the day. Nicholas Backstrom being injured is a key difference there, and he's up there in years anyway. Right now, they're at a point where Alexander Ovechkin's line mates, it's maybe the most impressive thing about Ovechkin is that he has 20 goals in 35 games played at age 37, and his line mates right now are Dylan Strome at center and Connor Sherry on the right wing. Strome and Sherry are his line mates. That is brutal. That is a lack of depth. Now, they have some decent players on their other line with Anthony Mantha and Evgeny Kuznetsov, but the Capitals are old. They are painfully old. The Capitals are, I believe, by age, the oldest team in hockey. They have 15 players over 30 years old. 15 players. For comparison's sake, I know the Sabres are the youngest team in hockey. Capitals have 15 players over 30. The Sabres have 2. And one of those is Craig Anderson, who is a goalie and is 42 years old. One key player that is really aged out for them, and I think, someone they have really yet to replace, unless you want to count Mantha for that, which maybe you would want to, TJ Oshie. It's over. TJ Oshie, I mean, he's still playing, he's still playing bottom 6 minutes, and I'm sure maybe he's playing a defensive role for them. I'm not sure. But Oshie is done. He is now 36 years old. 5 goals, 6 assists, 11 points in 22 games played. Not great numbers. So slow at this point in his career. Oshie has really aged out. Looking at some of their other key players that play a lot of minutes, just go down their ice time list. John Carlson at 33 years old. And he's still a very offensive defenseman at the very least. Ice time leader. So Carlson at 33. Orlov is second. He's 31. Nick Jensen is third. He's 32. Alex Ovechkin is fourth. He is 37. Eric Gustafsson is 30. Kuznetsov is 30. Trevor Van Riemsdyk is 31. Oshie, I mentioned, is 36. Marcus Johansson is playing minutes for them. He's 32. Lars Eller is playing minutes for them. He's 33. They're just so old. Now, how do they look in the advanced stats for this year? Their expected goals for is pretty good. Their expected goals for percentage, I should say, the amount of goals percentage-wise they should score versus their opponent, they are 13th in the NHL. Now, expected goals for total, how many goals they're expected to score on offense at 5-on-5, they are 10th. So they are more an offensive team than a defensive team. They are 18th in expected goals for against. PDO. They're right down the middle, so they're not really getting unlucky. They're not really getting lucky. They're pretty much right in the middle of the league. And then so their advanced numbers are pretty good. They're above average, not a ton above average, but they're above average. And in net, in goal, they're getting average production. It's not killing them. It's not driving them. Goal saved above expected. Darcy Kemper, their starting goaltender, ranks 23rd out of 57 qualifying goaltenders. Okay, maybe not what they would have been intending when they got the Stanley Cup winning goaltender from last season, but 23rd out of 57. Charlie Lindgren is their backup. He's 27th out of 57. So they're getting middle of the road goaltending. They're just a slightly above average team. They're better offensively than they are defensively. That's the story on the Capitals. I think they are a good team. I think Ovechkin is still one of the best goal scorers in hockey. They still got enough talent to where I think they are going to be a problem to jump over in the Eastern Conference. And because they are not in a rebuild phase, to me, they are more likely to swing a big trade to win now than the Sabres are. And if they do that at some point this year, that'll be only another advantage just in their timeline when it comes to just specifically this season. So that's the Capitals story. We'll come back, and I'll tell you who my number one threat to the Sabres is for this playoff race, and I do believe it's the Florida Panthers. We'll talk about them when we return here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Did you know the driving high is consider driving under the influence. That's right. Driving under the influence of marijuana is against the law in every state, even in states where marijuana is legal. That means driving high could get you a DUI. And if you think law enforcement officers can't tell when you're driving high, you're wrong. And friends, your friends can tell, your coworkers can tell, your parents can tell, everyone can tell. So what makes you think that law enforcement officers don't know when you're driving high? Driving under the influence of marijuana can slow your response time and change how you perceive time and speed. So even if you think you're fine to drive when you're high, you're not. Because the bottom line is, if you feel different, you drive different. And driving high is driving under the influence. So remember, drive high, get a DUI. Paid for by NHTSA. Back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast with Joe DiBiase. Okay, let's talk about the team that I believe is the biggest threat to make the playoffs out of this playoff race. And for this playoff race, I would mostly consider the Capitals to be a part of it, the Islanders, the Red Wings, the Sabres, and the Panthers. I don't think Montreal, despite the fact they're at 33 points, is a legitimate threat. And the Rangers are in a spot at the top with 43 points, top wildcard spot, but the Sabres are 9 points behind them. That's a tough ask. It's a tough ask, and I think Igor Shesterkin is too good a goaltender to allow them to collapse. The team could play poorly, and I think the goalie would keep them just above water. The Rangers, by the way, have a very good goal differential at plus 20 on the season. So those 5 teams, Washington, Islanders, Detroit, Buffalo, Florida. I think the number one team there is the team that of the 5 are currently at the bottom of the standings. Of those 5, the lowest team is Florida with 34 points in 34 games. Same amount of points as the Sabres, but they've played 2 more games. Some of this is reputation. Florida, for the last 2 years, has been a legitimate Stanley Cup contender. They have not achieved their playoff success they have liked. They have fallen to the Lightning in back-to-back years. But Florida has been an ultra-talented team, and they still are an ultra-talented team. They have a lot of key players. Matthew Tkachuk, I mean, that's the new one, right? A big trade they swung in the offseason. Kind of a blow-up trade a little bit to their core. Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar being sent to Calgary. Matthew Tkachuk being acquired. Now, with Mackenzie Weegar going out the door, the guy that's really replaced him is former Sabre Brandon Montour in an expanded role. He is having his best season as a pro. His advanced numbers are really solid, are really incredible. He's got 26 points in 32 games played. He's playing 25 minutes a night, which is right now actually 1 second more per night than Aaron Ekblad. So Montour, he's their number one defenseman, even over Aaron Ekblad this season. He's been great. And those two have really carried the load for the Panthers on the blue line. Gustav Forsling, Radko Gudas, Mark Stahl, they're really just kind of pieced it together after those top 2. Those top 2 are great, but beyond that, they have a lot of holes on their blue line. How is the Matthew Tkachuk trade going? As I just mentioned, that was their big move of the offseason, to bring him in, and first-round picks, Huberdeau, Weegar, just a huge, huge price to pay to get him to Florida. Individually, it's going well. Tkachuk has 39 points in 31 games played. That leads the team. That leads the Florida Panthers. In fact, it leads them by 11. Carter Verhaeghe is second with 28 points. Now, part of that is Sasha Barkov has missed some games, Alexander Barkov, but even Barkov, 22 points in 25 games. I mean, that maybe is the biggest thing they're missing. It's not even Huberdeau. It's not Weegar, because Tkachuk has replaced Huberdeau's production, and Montour has replaced Weegar's production. What they're missing is Barkov. Barkov is under a point a game, and he's missed 6 games. So 22 points in 25 games from a guy that last year had 88 points in 67 games. The year before that had 58 points in 50 games. 96 points in 82 games back in 2018-19. He has had a point a game or more in 3 of the last 4 seasons. This year, he's a step below it. Now, his advanced numbers look like he's fine, so maybe he's just getting unlucky. His shooting percentage is probably, the key for that. I think there's positive regression coming for Barkov. 7.3% shooting percentage. Last year, he was at 18.2%. Guys don't just get 3 times worse at scoring goals overnight. That doesn't happen. I think Barkov is snake bitten. His career average, by the way, is 13.9. I do believe his shooting percentage could even double by the time the season is over. So because I see positive regression coming from Barkov And their advanced numbers are really good. I think Florida is the team to beat when it comes to this final playoff spot in the Eastern Conference, assuming those top 7 teams all stay in. Now, what are their advanced numbers? The only one I'm really going to even point out to you here, I guess I'll look at their goaltending too, but the number one reason I think they're this good, they are in expected goals for percentage, number 4 in the NHL. They're 4th in the league at 5-on-5. Their special teams has let them down. Their PDO has let them down. In fact, I had their PDO in front of me, and I just closed it. Florida in PDO this year, which is shot percentage combined with save percentage. And the teams that are right at the top of the league are generally considered the most unlucky teams in hockey. And the Florida Panthers in PDO are, oh, wow, I'm stunned. I'm not going to lie. I'm stunned. They're 17th, middle of the road. Okay. I'll back off it a little bit, but not all the way, because I do think the more important number there is expected goals for percentage at 4th. In fact, expected goals scored, they are 2nd in the NHL. They are the 2nd best offense in hockey at 5-on-5. Expected goals against, they're close to the bottom, 12th from the bottom, below average when it comes to goals allowed. Now, in net, they're not getting the best production, and that's a part of this. And that's kind of crazy, given that they've invested more in goaltending than anybody in hockey. They gave Sergei Bobrovsky a $10 million per year contract. They spent a first-round pick on goalie Spencer Knight when nobody spends first-round picks on goaltenders anymore. They did that in the same offseason. And 3 years later, neither of them can perform. Bobrovsky this year, .895 save percentage. .895 save percentage. Spencer Knight, a .909 save percentage. Goals saved above expected. Bobrovsky ranks 32nd out of 57. Spencer Knight, 35th out of 57. So both guys are giving them below average production. And for the amount they're investing in net, that to me is the key thing that has let them down. That's the thing, though, I'm not sure will bring them back. I think Barkov will get better. I think some of their shooting percentage numbers will get better, but I'm not sure about their goaltending. And that might be the window or the opportunity the Sabres have to sneak above them at the end of the year. And for now, they are above them. But I think Florida is the most talented team of these 5 that are competing for a playoff spot. And if you were asking me right now, I would pick them. I would pick them to make up those 6 points. I would pick them to get back in. I think they are the most capable of going on a crazy run at some point. In Florida right now, by the way, that is represented in the odds at BetOnline. Over here. It's reverse. Florida is minus 140 to make the playoffs. They are minus money. They're more likely than not to make the playoffs. And their odds are better than Washington's. Their odds are better than Washington's to make the postseason. So I'm in on Florida. I think that will be the toughest team for the Sabres to stay above when it comes to getting that 8th playoff spot. All right, we'll end things here on the show. So thanks everybody for listening. Again, stay safe, stay warm, don't go outside, don't travel, just hunker down, watch the Bills game on Saturday, watch some football. Remember, football is going to be on Saturday is going to be like Sunday because Sunday is Christmas. I know not being able to be with family for the holidays sucks, but there's also some good hockey on. You can scoreboard watch, right? All these playoff teams I'm talking about. Watch the Capitals and root against them. Watch the Islanders and root against them. Maybe not them. They are the most boring team to ever watch in the world. Okay, but Detroit, Florida. Watch Florida and root against them. That'll be your sports watching homework for the next couple of days. So thanks everybody for listening and making us your first listen every day here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Now, be sure to make your next listen Locked On Sports today. Peter Bukowski brings you the biggest stories from around the sports world in 20 minutes. Get the analysis and opinions before anyone else with our local and national experts and insiders. Locked On Sports today, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.